Welcome. My name is Emily Goldman. I'm a financial aid administrator and a co-chair of the OASTA Outreach Committee. Today we'll be discussing financial aid, the basics, and the new details in our ever-changing world. Topics we will discuss on this presentation are what is financial aid, the cost of attendance, or COA, student aid index, or SAI, financial need, categories, types, and sources of financial aid, the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, verification, and special circumstances. So what is financial aid? Financial aid consists of all the funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. Those could range from grants that you don't have to repay to student loans. So let's talk about the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is the direct and indirect costs combined to determine how much a student needs to go to school. So on the direct cost side of things, we'll have tuition and fees and housing and food for those living on campus. Those are the things that you'll see on a tuition bill. Indirect costs are things like books, transportation, and personal expenses. So all the other things it takes for a student to go to school. The cost of attendance varies widely from college to college, and each institution will set its own cost of attendance based on the makeup of their school and students. So what is the Student Aid Index, or the SAI? It's an index number used by colleges to determine eligibility for aid. It's calculated using information provided on the FAFSA. While the cost of attendance ranges from each institution, the SAI stays the same regardless of the institution. The SAI is not the amount of money owed to the college, nor is it based on the ability to pay for college. It is an index number used to determine eligibility. It ranges from negative $1,500 to just shy of $1 million. The lower the SAI equals more aid eligibility. So let's talk about financial need. So we've talked about cost of attendance, the variable number. We've talked about our student aid net index number, which is our constant number. And how do those work together with financial aid need? So the cost of attendance minus the student aid index equals the financial need. We have some examples of higher, middle, and lower cost institutions on the slide here. So you can see where the financial need or eligibility can vary from institution to institution based on that cost of attendance. So at a higher cost institution where their cost of attendance is set at $58,000, they have an SAI of $8,000, means their eligibility for need is $50,000. But on the lower end, with a cost of attendance of $22,000, with that same SAI of $8,000, the need is significantly lower at $14,000. So we've got categories of financial aid. Your financial aid can fall into two types, so need-based and non-need-based, so just as the calculation on the previous slide. And then of those, they can be in the form of a scholarship, a grant, a loan, or employment. So gift aid is money that doesn't have to be paid back. That normally comes in the form of a scholarship or a grant. Scholarships are usually based on merit, skill, or some sort of unique characteristic, while grants are normally based on financial need. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about loans a little bit. This is considered self-help aid. It's money that students and parents can borrow to help pay for college expenses. Repayment typically begins after education is finished. And while loans can be scary, we always recommend that students and families only borrow what is really needed. You can look at loans as an investment in the future. Additional self-help aid would be work-study employment. This allows students to earn money to help pay for educational costs. While uh, those funds don't come off of a tuition bill, it would come in the form of a paycheck, or it could come in as non-monetary compensation, such as room and board. A student would decide whether or not they were going to work and the number of the hours they work, and institutions take note of the student's schedule when determining work schedules. And while eligibility may be shown on an aid offer, a separate application is necessary. So there are many sources of financial aid. The largest is from the federal government, from the federal student aid program. The next would be states. Ohio, we have a robust higher ed system, and we are increasing awards every year. College and universities also offer institutional funds available for students and families, private sources, and also employers. The federal student aid program includes the federal Pell Grant, the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG, the Teacher Education Assistance Grant for higher education, federal work study, federal direct student loans, and federal PLUS loans. The federal Pell Grant and federal SEOG grant are need-based grants that do not have to be repaid. The teacher education assistance for college and higher education starts out as a grant, and as long as um, all tasks required for that grant have been followed, it will remain a grant. If the contract is not followed, then it does turn into an unsubsidized loan. Federal Work Study is also a federal program where a student earns money while working a job, either on campus or at an off-campus partner. And federal direct loans and federal plus loans are part of the loan profile. Here's a list of the current Ohio student aid programs. This list has increased significantly in the last number of years. We encourage you to visit highered.ohio.gov to learn more. So colleges and universities are also a large source of financial aid for students. They have awards that are both based both on merit and need. The awards could be gift or self-help. Many use the information from the FAFSA or other applications to determine eligibility. There are deadlines usually required by the institution, so you want to make sure that you know any deadline for the individual institution and make sure that you're meeting those deadlines. You want to check with each college and university to see what's available. Other outside sources that may have funding for college could be foundations, local businesses, charitable organizations, civic organization, churches, parents' employers, veterans benefits, and deadlines are generally in the spring, and many scholarships small scholarships do add up. So if you're part of any sort of organization or club, doesn't hurt to ask if there is funding available for the future. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the FAFSA. We have the opportunity to see screenshots from the 25-26 FAFSA, and we will go through those as a student, so we can see what you will be looking at as you work to continue the FAFSA in the future. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's the application for federal grants, work study, and federal student loans. It's also the application for state of Ohio grants. It's also used for some school and institutional scholarships and grants. The information provided is demographic and also taxable information. The FAFSA may be filed on or before December 1st. It's currently in beta testing, and we recommend waiting till December 1st at least to complete the FAFSA. While we'll have live testing going on, the site is scheduled to be available for all on December 1st. The vast majority of students and families will use the studentaid.gov website to complete the FAFSA. There are a handful of situations where a paper FAFSA will be necessary, but it will be very few and far between. What you can do now while you're waiting for that December 1st date is to create your FSA ID now. Many colleges do set FAFSA priority deadlines. So again, you're going to want to check with each institution to determine if there is a priority deadline and make sure that you are completing your FAFSA within that time to be considered for institutional aid. Students do not have to be admitted to the school to submit a FAFSA. So go ahead and complete the FAFSA and add the number of schools that you're looking at, even if you don't move forward in the admittance process. You will submit a new form every year. It will be a renewal form, and we're hoping that that will open up in October 1 of next year, um, as we will go back to a normal calendar. So a little visual process. So you will create your FSA ID, which is your username and password to use for studentaid.gov. You will complete the FAFSA. It will be processed by the Department of Education. A copy of the processed information will be sent to the schools that you select. You will do one FAFSA per student per year. So the first step would be to create an FSA ID, and students and parents will each need individual FSA IDs. You'll go to the studentaid.gov page, and in the top right has a Create an Account button. You'll enter login information, personal information, mailing address, email, phone, language preference, and challenge questions. Some tips on creating your FSA ID. The phone number, social security number, and email can only be associated with one FSA ID. So students and parents need to make sure that they have separate information. Students are not recommended to use a high school email account, as those accounts do usually get shut off in a future at a future time, and you don't want to be locked out of your FSA ID because you don't have access to that email account anymore. We recommend that both parents create an FSA ID. Each student filling out a FAFSA needs an FSA ID, and the FSA ID should not be shared. So let's talk about completing the FAFSA. First page is a landing page. It'll look like this. You'll hit Start New Form to start a 2025-26 FAFSA form. Like I said before, these screenshots will be walking through as a student, so we're going to choose the student role. And the first set will be student identity information, and the student will go through and review and to make sure that the information is accurate. If they need to update any personal information on this page, they will have to go to their account settings on studentaid.gov and make the change there. For fields related to the student's mailing address, the student can edit them directly on this page. The next set will ask for IRS consent. It is required for tax filers and non-tax filers to allow the IRS to review and determine if filing happened and to transfer the information directly into the FAFSA. Everyone who contributes to the FAFSA will be required to provide consent to transfer data from the IRS. This includes non-filers, people without social security numbers, and foreign tax filers. The processing system will confirm if there's tax information on file and bring it directly into the FAFSA. It will confirm those who are non-filers, which may reduce verification burden, and no consent equals no federal aid. So if consent is if it's not consented, then no financial aid, student will not be eligible for federal financial aid. When tax information is imported successfully, you will get this screen. Let's go ahead and talk about student dependency status. The student can go through the FAFSA as a dependent or an independent student, and based on the criteria, it will determine what questions the student is asked and whose information will be required. If a student is under the age of 24 with no unusual circumstances, or if the student is dependent, they will report their own information and their parent or / contributor information. If the student is over the age of 24 or hits another criteria for an independent student, they will report their own information and their spouse's information. Other things that determine student dependency would be if the student is an orphan, ward of the court, or in foster care, is working on a graduate degree, has been emancipated or is in legal guardianship, is married, has children or dependents of their own, or is in a veteran status. Students will be asked about their homelessness status, and if they say yes, we will follow up with how that was determined, whether that was determined by a shelter, a high school liaison, or other means. Students will then be asked if they fall into an unusual circumstance that would prevent them from contacting their parents and not having a parent to add to the FAFSA. This could be a situation where the student is in an abusive or threatening environment, they've been abandoned, they've been a victim of human trafficking. There are a number listed here. So if the student is in one of those circumstances, they would select yes. If the student selects yes, they would be what we call provisionally independent, which would allow them to complete the FAFSA form and would also identify the school, identify to the school that a follow would be needed and documentation would need to be provided to determine a final dependency status. For students whose parents are totally unwilling to provide information, they may apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only. Regardless of the student's eligibility, if the parent is not willing to give their information on the FAFSA, the student would have to apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only and not receive any other eligibility. Student is deemed a dependent. They will ask a number of questions to determine which parent would be included on the FAFSA. So there are going to be a number of questions, kind of a parent wizard on who needs to be included on the FAFSA. Additionally, they've added an online tool on the studentaid.gov website. The link is below here. So if you are in a family situation where you have unmarried parents or it is a more unusual family circumstance, we suggest that you go and use the tool or follow these questions here to determine which parent to include on the FAFSA form. The student will invite the parent to participate in the FAFSA. So the dependent student to invite the parent will need to know the parent's legal name, social security number, and date of birth. So if it is possible for the student and parent to complete the FAFSA together in person, that is the ideal situation. If not, being a phone call away would be very helpful. So some key guidance to inviting the parent. Again, the parent invite must match the legal name, date of birth, and social security number. The email address for the parent invite must match the one used for the parent's FSA ID. Only one parent info is needed to progress through the form. So a student can invite parent number one, and parent number one can invite parent number two if needed through the form. If there is an issue with the match, the student will be the one that needs to make the fix through the FAFSA form. And again, we recommend talking through those parent wizard questions or using the online tool to determine which parent is going to be invited on the FAFSA. Again, this is another infographic to help determine that situation as well. Students will be asked some demographic questions. They'll be asked about gender, race, and ethnicity. Responses to these demographic questions are for research purposes only. These will not affect a student's eligibility. It will not be used in any calculation, nor will they be shared with any of the schools which the student applies. Additionally, a prefer not to answer selection will be available for all of these questions that are asked. Student will be asked about their citizenship status, their parent education status, whether the student's parent was killed in the line of duty. They may be eligible for additional funding if they fall into this category. They will ask about the student's high school completion status, and this will be based on their completion status at the beginning of the 2025-26 school year. Student will be asked about high school information, so they will look by searching via state and then the city and the high school name, and there'll be a search button, and then the student will select the appropriate high school. There'll be some financial questions that are asked from the taxes. Most of the tax information, like I said, would be transferred directly from the IRS. It is a masked transfer. You will not see the information on the FAFSA. It is an automatic transfer and completely masked. So a couple of follow-up questions, though, on the financial information would be if there is an IRA rollover or a pension rollover, any college grant, scholarship, or AmeriCorps benefits that were reported to the IRS, and if there was any foreign earned income exclusion. So those would be things that could be found on the tax return, but aren't necessarily transferred directly from the IRS. Students will be asked a number of asset questions, such as the total number of cash savings and checking accounts, the balance of those on the day that the FAFSA is completed, current net worth of investments, including real estate, and the current net worth of businesses or investment farms. Students will always answer these questions if they start the form because we won't have access to the family's adjusted gross income. The answers are not used in the SAI calculation if the above criteria are met. So once the parents complete the FAFSA, families that meet all three of the following criteria will not have assets reported. They will have a total AGI of less than $60,000. They did not file a Schedule A, B, D, E, F, or H on their federal tax return, and either do not file a Schedule C or file a form with a net business gain or loss of less than $10,000. The student will select up to 20 schools to receive their FAFSA information. You will select the school, and there's also a way to move schools up and down from a ranking system. In Ohio, the order of the schools does not matter. In some states, it may matter for state aid, but in Ohio, it does not. You can add up to 20 institutions to send your information to. And again, you don't have to be admitted to all 20 to send your information to those schools. You'll hit a review page where you can review each section of the FAFSA to make sure that you filled out the questions accurately. This is what the page looks like that the student will see to see the status of their parent contributors and see if the invite's been sent, if the parent has completed their section or not. So the student will be able to see where in the process the parent is with their portion of the FAFSA. This will be down to the student's signature. So they will agree to the terms and then sign the form. It's an electronic signature through that FSA ID. The student will see a confirmation that the student section is complete, but it will also let them know that there is contributor information that is still needed, and while the student has signed, the form cannot process without that contributor information. Here's an example of the parent invitation email. So the parent will receive an email from Federal Student Aid to complete the rest of the student's form. They will hit the login button and be able to log in with with the parent's FSA ID, their username and password, to begin the parent section of the FAFSA. The parent will log in and either through the login on the invitation email, or they can log into the studentaid.gov website. And when they log in, their My Activity page will also let them know they can accept the invitation and move forward with the FAFSA. If the parent needs to invite the other spouse or partner, they will enter the information and invite the other parent or a spouse. Again, it'll be first and last name, date of birth, and social security number and email address. The parents will be asked about federal benefits received for the household. And these will be for any time during 2023 or 2024 if the parent or anyone in the family federal benefits. Parent family size. The family size is derived from the dependents on the tax forms, but parents can also make sure that their family size is accurate on the family size page. We know that there could be changes to a family's size from one tax year to the next, and so this is a way to ensure that the family size is accurate. Parents will be asked about the number of students they will have in college between July 1 of 2025 and June 30th of 2026. While this is a question on the FAFSA, this information is not used in the student aid index calculation. Parents will be asked a few tax information questions as well from 2023. Again, we'll have an IRA rollover, a pension rollover question, if the parent received an earned income credit, and the foreign income exclusion, and the college grant scholarship and AmeriCorps benefit question is the same as the student. The parent asset questions are the same as the student, with the addition of annual child support received as a question. And please note that on the parent side, assets do not include the value of the primary residence, the value of life insurance, or the value of traditional retirement plans. If a family does own a second home or has other real estate holdings for rental properties, the value of those properties would be included. Okay, we're almost done. So we're at our review of the parent responses. So the parent can go through and make sure that their answers are accurate. Just know that parent roles can only review parent questions and student roles can only review student questions. The parent will then agree and submit. And then we will have our congratulations page that the form has then been completed. What will happen then is there'll be a 1 to 3 day processing time for the Department of Ed to process, and then the student will have access to their FAFSA submission summary and an estimate of their federal student aid. This page may be needed for scholarship applications, and while this is an estimate of federal student aid, um, um, financial aid offers do come directly from the individual institutions after the admittance process has been completed. So FAFSAs can be selected for a process called verification. It's done at the Department of Ed level. So if your FAFSA has been selected for federal verification, you will need to complete verification at all schools that you have applied to. We will ask for additional documentation, and that will be submitted to each school your student is considering. The IRS consent may reduce verification and the documentation that is needed, and we are finding that that is the case. With the new IRS consent, we are seeing a lot fewer cases of verification being needed. A verification is used to determine the accuracy of FAFSA data to ensure that the right students are receiving the right dollars. So let's talk about special circumstances. These are things that cannot be explained on the FAFSA. So when students and families are filling out the FAFSA, they are asked to give the most accurate information based on the questions that they are asked. There are some things that could have happened in a student's families that can't be explained on the FAFSA. Maybe there has been a death in the family or a loss of employment. And while the information you provided was from 2023, that's not the true outlook of what's going on in that family at the current time. So a student can work with each individual institution to do a special circumstances appeal. So each college handles this process a little differently. There are no universal procedures. We will review and request additional information. Many times you will fill out an appeal form and be asked to provide documentation. And those appeal forms will vary from institution to institution, and the documentation required will also vary from institution to institution. Many times you will send a written explanation and documentation to the financial aid office, and the determination of the outcome of that appeal will happen at the individual financial aid office. So let's talk about college communication methods. Most institutions now use a student portal, so it's an online resource that students can access to register for classes, view financial aid, and billing. So if your student is looking at a school that uses a portal, we want to make sure that they log in, they are checking to make sure that they are seeing messages and any next steps that they have to take and meeting any deadlines. Most colleges and universities use a school-assigned email account that students are required to activate and check regularly. While we know that email can be antiquated, it is usually the universal method to communicate with students. So it is important that you regularly check your college's assigned email account to make sure you're not missing any messages. More documents are being handled electronically, so just make sure that you work with the financial aid office and provide documentation. If you're asked to provide documentation, that you are sharing it in the method so it is handled securely. And then parents should be advised that once a student enrolls in college, their personal identifiable information becomes protected under FERPA, and students would need to give parent or guardian permission to access this information if they choose. Just wanted to provide resources on receiving some additional help. So college financial aid offices are a wonderful resource while you're in this process. If you have questions for the individual office, please reach out. If you fall into one of those special circumstances, you'll definitely want to reach out and discuss your case and what next steps you need to take. Studentaid.gov, where you complete the FAFSA, also has a plethora of resources. It has an entire resource page full of great infographics and videos. Your high school guidance counselor is a wonderful resource, and please lean on them as they go through a lot of training and will be a wonderful personal resource for you. Each school will also have a net price calculator, so you can get down to the brass tacks and know exactly what you're looking at as far as what's it going to cost me out of pocket. So the net price calculator can give you a good idea of what you may be looking at based on the information that you provide. We also just want to be very cautious. There are consultants out there that ask for a small fee to help you with all of these things, and we find that that is a lot of money that doesn't give you a lot of value. So be wary and very cautious if there's a consultant out there asking for a small fee to help you with these things. The FAFSA is the free application, and so we really don't think anybody should have to pay to complete the application and use an outside source. All right, I've got my contact information here. You can also reach out to the outreach committee as well if you have any questions. Thank you so much, and best of luck this year and in filling out your FAFSAs. Take care.